Hey guys, very warm welcome to you. Thanks so much for joining us for our tonic tutorial, our Taste, Learn and Discover with LaPont. Great producer today, not that the others haven't been, but certainly a producer that I've been following personally since their inaugural release in 2014. And amazing sort of consistency right from the get-go. So this should be good. Just a couple of formalities. If you've hopefully got your wines poured, so we're going obviously 1 through 4, and hopefully you would have picked up your little brochure here when you purchase your pack. If not, you are able to download a copy through the link in the feed below. So, and we'll just give you a few more details. But otherwise, just sit back and we'll go through the wines together. Tonic, I guess, came about through two friends two good mates based in South Australia, Glenn Barry and Dan Coward. Glenn was at the time, I think, winemaker at Napstein, and Dan Coward was sales and marketing manager at Shaw and Smith, iconic producer in the Adelaide Hills. So, simply acquaintances and good friends. I guess started talking about making some wines that were a little bit sort of less conventional than what they were involved with work-wise. So 2014 was the first vintage, and when we're talking about small production, these were literally sort of micro cuvées. I think some of them down to 24, 25 dozen in the first release. So not much wine at all. So more of a certainly a side project, but it's certainly grown, I think, since then, and these have really become a force, I think. And I guess part of one of the features of their wines is the look of the bottles. They look great. Maybe sort of point to wines that aren't really that serious, but I tell you what, the wines in the bottle are certainly they're not playthings. They're great to drink, really complex. And that's sort of been a feature of their wines since the first release. It's so we've got 4 of the wines. They also produce a Nebbiolo, and all of them are from the 2019 vintage, which has to be said was a very challenging one in many of the regions in South Australia. We see the bushfires and whatnot are very fresh in our minds. So. I think these wines are certainly a testament to the guy's ability, and certainly Glenn as the winemaker ability to craft some supremely sort of delicious wine out of those conditions. So the first wine, which is the Chardonnay, and me being in retail and for quite a long time now, a lot of people would disagree with this, but wines like this really point to me, or a pointer that Chardonnay has to be maybe the greatest wine made in Australia today. A lot of people say you're crazy, Shiraz or Cabernet or Pinot Noir even, maybe surpasses Chardonnay. But I think if you really look at the great examples of Chardonnay across Australia, the diversity of styles, there's just such depth in the category, and such good wine, and a wine like this, which I think for the price is just remarkable. So what we might do, we'll have a little bit of a smell and a taste. Straight away I sort of get something that's that wine's quite sort of immediately complex, very appealing, without going too much into the details. But this wine is perhaps a slight nod to Chardonnay from the Jura region in France, which is very famous for wines that are quite they're oxidatively handled in the cellar, meaning that they come in contact with oxygen, deliberately left to oxidize and become less fresh. So a good amount of time on skins in the cellar, and then this wine is actually what if you were making one in the Jura would be called Ouya. So it means that the wine has been topped up, so naturally the wine in the barrel will slightly oxidize, evaporate if you like, and they leave it. It develops a floor, dead yeast cells which sit on top of the wine to protect it, This wine does, though, get a bit of fresh wine poured back into the barrel just to give it a bit more freshness. But I think if you smell that, you can sort of get a little bit of that nuttiness, that sort of bruised apple, bruised pear sort of character. But just lovely wine. It's back to my point just about Chardonnay in Australia. I mean, there's probably not too many wines at this sort of price level that you can really sort of say, well, you know, that's you know, really complex, great to drink, you know, maybe age worthy as well. You know, it's so different to, you know, the Chardonnays of bygone years, and I think a lot of people still have, you know, perhaps bad memories of those really sort of worked wines from the 80s, early 90s, which, you know, a lot of full malo, a lot of oak in the cellar, very blousy. But, you know, Chardonnay, I always tell customers, you know, is all about sort of weight and texture and, you know, flavour. You don't want the wine to be, you know, too lean or too acidic, too reductive. It's, you know, they're about being opulent and giving pleasure. So I think that wine's beautiful, and just such a complex wine. And again, I go back to the price. You know, for the money, there's probably not too many Chardonnays for me that deliver that sort of you know, interest at that price. I hope you enjoyed that, but yeah, beautiful wine. So moving on, rosé, extremely popular category in Australia today. A lot of, you know, variables in style, but I know Glenn's rosé is very much, and if he was sitting here, he'd probably say, you know, this is very much an ode to Bandol, which is a great region in the south of France, great appellation that produces, you know, some of the most, you know, flavoursome, most savoury sort of rosés in the world. So predominantly this wine has been Mataro or Mourvèdre with a bit of Grenache, but this vintage sees sort of a reverse of that. It's about 70% Grenache, the remainder Mourvèdre, and that's simply you know, relative to the, you know, challenging vintage conditions that we were talking about earlier, and just what, you know, what fruit was available. Again, not much is done in the cellar to this wine. You know, pigeage, which is, I think, common throughout all the wines, which means foot treading, short time on skins, obviously, just for the colour. But again, like, you know, it's interesting, like in Bandol today, you know, there is sort of a shift to make wines that are maybe more, you know, that classic Provence style, like much fruitier, very clean. It's interesting that, you know, a lot of the great producers even are throwing a little bit more Grenache into their rosés. So it kind of coincides with this, but even though this was sort of, you know, forced by nature. But just, you know, if you give it a smell, you know, you're automatically picking up that sort of savoury note. It's almost like a dark sort of spice. There's sort of this underlying, like, beautiful sort of sweet fruit character. And you've got all that sort of, you know, that beautiful sort of vibrancy from Grenache. Grenache is such a, you know, great variety to use with rosé, and certainly complements Mourvèdre, not just for rosé, but, you know, in dry red wine as well. Beautiful wine. I mean, you drink this obviously with, you know, plenty of sunshine, good friends, so on. Okay, so next wine that I'm extremely, you know, passionate about. I love great Grenache, and, you know, in Australia we're so fortunate. You have some really old, you know, old vines on original rootstock in many of the regions. You know, some of the vines really are, you know, in the Barossa, McLaren Vale, you know, well over 150 years old. So quite unique. Great Grenache for me, you know, is all about sort of perfume, elegance, you know, finesse. Such a tricky variety to get right, not dissimilar to Pinot Noir. it ripens very late in the piece, so physiological ripeness is achieved very late in the ripening process. You leave it go too long, and you get these wines that are quite sort of confected, boiled lolly sort of characters. Quite a lot of Grenache was made like that not too long ago in Australia, but I think a lot of producers now understand the variety, the beauty of it, and just err on the side of caution, picking it a little bit earlier, not too much winemaking, certainly not too much oak, just to showcase all those beautiful aromas and flavours. So Tonic's Grenache I think is testament to really where the variety is in Australia now. Again, not too much done in the cellar. It's very lightly handled. Comes from 2 vineyards in Clare. One of them right up near Wendouree, very famous producer up there, and from a vineyard in Blewett Springs in McLaren Vale, which is really sort of one of the epicenters of great Grenache in Australia today. So give it a little bit of a smell. Hopefully you can see what I mean. That wine, immediately you're getting all that sort of lovely strawberry, potpourri sort of aromas. A little bit of that sort of Provençal herb, and just, I could just smell that wine all day really. But we'll drink it. And I think, you can sort of maybe see what I was talking about. Like that wine is so elegant, so pure. There's no real warmth from the alcohol. There's nothing sort of jutting out. The acidity is beautifully handled. The tannins are very fine, very lacy for me. Just gorgeous to drink. And I think you can probably also see the similarities that you can get with Pinot Noir. So colour is obvious. It's not particularly dark, but the aromas and then the flavour. It's just beautifully balanced, not heavy. Great wine, I think. It's just Grenache. Maybe even more so than Mataro or Mourvedre. Is certainly a workhorse variety in Australia. I don't think yet, even given the great examples that exist in the market, has achieved that sort of reputation. But mark my word, it's only a matter of time until people cotton on to how good Grenache, especially from South Australia, can be. So great wines. Bravo, Glenn. Next one, Mataro, or Mourvedre as it's known elsewhere in the world. Mataro, sort of, Australia is the only place really that uses the name, even though Mataro, I believe, is a little village outside of Barcelona in Spain. So it takes its name, and that's where the variety is thought to originate from. Certainly that sort of area in Spain is, can produce, some terrific Mataro, Mourvedre, and, as does Australia. So again, similar to Grenache, there's just so much great old vineyard resource. Much of it, unfortunately, was grubbed up during the 70s, during vine pull, along with, some really old Shiraz and Grenache, if you can believe that. But many of it was lost. But fortunately, there are still some, extremely old vineyards, especially in the Brossa, great Mourvedre, but, also pockets around Clare and McLaren Vale. Great Mataro, I guess, is, you're looking at, if you're comparing it to the great expressions from around the world, especially in Bandol, south of France again, these wines are, much darker, have that sort of very overt, very noticeable sort of spice character, or black pepper, and they're quite a savoury variety. It still has this underlying core of sweet fruit, but, one of the features of the varieties is sort of, the savouriness that you get. It's good savoury. Again, you don't want, for me, you don't want, too much extraction in the wine. And again, like Glenn, as you've seen, none of these wines are sort of, overly, handled heavily in the cellar. Very lightly handled, light sort of extractions. Pigeage again. again, you just get that lovely sort of spice note. There's almost a sort of a licorice or aniseed quality to that wine. Just amazing to think, really, that these wines, priced as they are, as good as they look, come from some really old, very mature vineyards. Perhaps in other parts of the world they might be a lot more expensive, but this wine, probably worth mentioning, had quite a significant time on its skins. It's just, leaches out that colour a little bit. Flavour, so I think it was about 40 days or 41 days on skins for that. Again, but nothing much done to this wine. Like, it's just very gently, very deftly sort of handled. I love the sort of presence this has on the palate. It's quite sort of, very textured. It goes, I find, like, when I'm tasting that and talking to you now, it's got this sort of lovely line through the palate, right through the back. So that sort of, indicates to me, this has come from some pretty serious quality fruit. Again, if I was drinking, like, anything protein based is going to work with this. A nice bit of eye fillet, or even some something game will work. The wine will sort of cut through that. So there we have it. New releases from Tonic. The only thing I'll say, like, just to conclude, these wines are, as we talked about at the beginning, they're made in such limited volume, even though it's a little bit more than what they started out with. The wines just have such great reputation now. They always get taken up really quickly. So, if you enjoyed any of those, please be quick. Again, thank you so much for your time. Great to be with you, and hope you enjoy the wines.